Welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Brandon, and today we're going over the new Quince movie set, specifically looking at the 8 standby variant with this. So with this in mind, we still do run the old standby combo at the top, looking at the Nino from the last set, set 2. This Nino allows us to be able to, at the end of our attack with the climax in play, pay 1, pitch 1 to burn 3. It also adds into the essentially like 12 standby package, right? When the climax is in play, this gets the standby trigger in all zones. So you can potentially shuffle this back into deck and use this as a standby trigger over and over again to get your pieces out early, and in the late game use this to push the damage for the win. Classic, we've seen this before. This was part of the big deck that was the menace to beat for a good portion of this last year. With that in mind, we do tie this in with the new standby combo at 1. Assuming all your field conditions are met, this card sits at 8-5 on attack and 6-5 defensively with character card Encore. This is your 1-1 target of the deck. On attack, you can use this to look at the top 2 cards of your deck and choose your own trigger, which also means you can put characters into waiting room, because when this character reverses its opponent, you can salvage 1. Standby, bring a piece to board. On reverse, salvage to get characters into hand. And you can choose your own trigger, so you can try to force out more standbys to push those 2/2s out early. So a little bit more versatility than our typical 1/1 because of that versatility with the ability to choose your own trigger. We're going to kind of break down why this is important as we look at the deck as a whole. So this is the deck overall. This is the deck that we're looking forward to, the deck that we're planning on going over today. Starting off at level 0. First off, we have Intimidating Sisters Ichika. This is essentially like the Aqua Wiki in regards to it's a pay 1, clock yourself from the top of deck to look at the top 2 cards. If they're both Quintuplets trait, you can add them to hand. So this allows us to potentially +2 at 0. Now, you don't have as much selectivity with this, but you're able to essentially just plus hand, which will be useful for character card Encore as you go. We also run the daily routine Nino Nakano. This is the card from the ban list that we do run, in part just because the versatility with this card and be able to get cards you want is pretty flexible. So you're able to ditch a Nino to draw a card, but you're also able to ditch a card, reveal the top card of your deck, salvage based on the level of that card revealed or lower. So this allows you top check essentially early, so you can kind of help make decisions with your own turn that way. It does tie in with the 1/1 just a little bit, so you can kind of move things around or put that card into waiting room later, or you can potentially draw into it with ditch draw ability here. The majority of this deck is Nino, so you should have the cards in hand for that. But because they're not all Nino, you do need to be cautious of that as you're going. Next up, we have Secretly Making an Effort Ichika. This is our climax swap, but also has the ability to potentially stock a card from hand. So that way you can kind of potentially pay out effects early. Our level 1 combo turn is probably going to be pretty stock intensive, so you can use this to potentially get that additional stock if needed. It also could eventually make our climax swap free, because you're stocking a card from hand already for that effect. So yes, you're ditching an additional card, essentially, but you don't have to pay the stock cost for that climax swap. We also then run Recreation Nino. This is from the new set as well. On play, you can choose a character, and you can give that ability to choose its own trigger, as long as it has the Nino in name. So you can also give this to 2/2 as well. Or further on, if it's just an on play, give it to a Nino. So you can do it as 0. This card also has the ability to pay 1, put itself into waiting room to look at the top 5 cards and add a Nino to hand. So another way to be able to kind of mill through your deck. It gives the ability, so it's still on play, the ability is still relevant. Pretty effective card. I run it as a 2 of in this deck, but I would not be surprised if you see this card more often, or even less often, because a lot of these effects are in similar places as well. I really appreciate this ability, just to also try to help mill through this deck a little bit faster as well. So, pretty useful card. We also have Frank Words Nino. This is our shuffle back ability, to be able to shuffle back and try to maximize our standby potential with this deck, as well as when it shuffles back, you can continue to give that ability to check the top of your deck and essentially choose your own trigger, discarding the other. We also run the Nino Brainstorm as well. This has the Snowball 500 power, where you get the reverse and you can continue to push that power as you go. It also has a Brainstorm effect as well, to be able to salvage a character from waiting room based off of the climaxes revealed. That additional power can actually become relevant in some matchups as well, but effectively it's here for the potential pay 1/1 is from the back row. Rounding out our 0 lineup, we also have the Flowers of Gratitude Nino. This is also from this new set as well. You can put a card from your hand into Clock to search your deck for up to 1 character with Nino in name. So very similar to the idea that we saw with Mushoku Tensei and the Ruijerd at 0. It also has the ability of when you attack, and all of the characters have Nino in name, you can, wait for it, choose your own trigger. So that rounds out our 0 lineup. We have quite a few cards that are allowing you to essentially choose your own trigger, so your stock should be as clean as you want it to be, or as heavy with standby as you want it to be. We are gunning through our deck trying to pull those standby triggers out consistently. So the fact that we're able to try to push that out with our zeros is helpful, especially as we get later in the game as well, right? There's more standbys we push out. We can standby more things out to try to push that damage and rush the game a little bit faster. Very effective level 0 game to be able to do that. As we jump into level 1, we already talked about our combo, but what really helps make this combo work as well is this Great Love Nino. If all of your characters are Nino, when this card attacks, look it up to the top 2 cards, and oh wait, continue to choose your own trigger. It also has the ability of when your character's trigger check reveals a standby, you can choose one of your characters and it gets 3,000 power to the end of turn. So because we're able to choose our own triggers and try to choose standby triggers, we could potentially pump up power in other lanes as well. So I really typically use this as a back row piece to be able to pump up our level 1 combo by an additional 3,000 power in the lanes that we need it, right? With standby, we're kind of swinging in the small lanes first, so we probably won't win. But if there are lanes that we can step over with power, I might potentially save those lanes so when we get there and we trigger standby, we can pump up that combo even more. The combo was sitting at 8-5 on attack, but given another 3k power, all of a sudden we're looking at 11-5, which that by itself is within Alice territory to be able to actually threaten Alice and force counters and whatnot. Any additional power pump. Say, I don't know, we trigger 2 standbys this turn. All of a sudden you have a lane that is outside of the counter range of Alice at 1, ready to go. And we have the character Encore ready to go by itself. So this is very much a tech piece into the matchups that we need it, but it is worth noting that this exists. I also kind of pair this along with our anti-change memory bomb. So with this Itsuki, this is a 1/1 that can, when it becomes reversed, put your battle opponent that's higher than their level, so anything that's brought out through standby or change or this crazy brainstorm like Alice or Pat Shin, you can, when this Itsuki is reversed, send that character to memory. So immediately clear it off the board. With Alice, you're dropping power in other lanes as well. Pretty interesting tool with that in mind. When level 3, you can also use this to remove it from field and field swap some characters around of your opponents. So that you can face into the characters you want to face into, and your level 3 game can have a little bit more flexibility, let's say. Rounding our level 1s, we do run the 2k counter with Yotsuba, in part just because 8-5 is when playing this with our 1/1s, 8-5 is actually pretty defendable in a lot of matchups that don't have those crazy board-based powers defensively, or offensively rather. In matchups where their on-attack power is 8k, this is pretty useful. This is also pretty nice with some of our other pieces as well, especially as we get further along in the game and we have some of our bigger pieces on board. Being able to defend them for free is pretty helpful. But that wraps up level 1. Going into level 2, we have 2 different level 2 profiles. First off, we have the 2-2. I only run this as 3 of because we're really trying to power through this matchup, trying to get into our level 3 game. This is the same 2-2 that we saw before in the original combo. We just don't run the climax because the card itself being a character encore, as long as you have the quintuplets on board, and being a 12k attacker. With a 1/1 in the back row, we also then can make this a 15 on attack if you trigger 1 standby. So you can still potentially at 1 be clearing Alice with these 2/2s and forcing them to either replay them or to fix that stage back up. The 2/1 Alice being the current example of what that power threshold looks like at that level. We run also the anti-change counter. In addition with that, this is the ability that we're going to need, especially further down the road as we look ahead towards Overlord coming out. And the amount of early plays that we see in the meta right now, this is a almost auto-include for any deck you're trying to build, especially as we're looking ahead towards fall season. Recognizing we technically still have 1 more week of regionals left in the UK. Outside of that, fall season is just far enough ahead that we want to be aware of this going forward. Looking at level 3, our level 3 lineup hasn't really changed a whole lot in the last year. We still see the Ichika back row that can pump soul, and heals on play. We also have our combo that we talked about before. We have the 3/2 each card that can change into a level 3 card in hand as early as level 2. You can also pay 2 to burn 1 with this card. And then we also run the Miku Icy Tail. So just trying to help get into some of those compressed decks a little bit more effectively as well. It's also on play search to be able to get the pieces we need. As a part of this list, I did end up cutting the early play healer. That's probably one of the biggest changes that I would make to this deck if I was trying to finagle some things in, is I would probably cut back on that level 0 lineup just a tiny bit to try to fix in that early play healer. As it is, that lineup is, for me, pretty crucial, but yeah, the biggest change I would make for this deck if I was going to try to tech in those early play heals would be affecting that level 0 lineup. With that in mind, this is the deck. As a functionality of how it plays, you're really kind of playing towards those combos, trying to benefit you in the best way possible. You're using all of those choose your trigger effects early and realistically throughout the game, trying to just get standby as often as possible. You're really playing into that standby package, really trying to just get the pieces on board to get your combo on board to close the game. Pay 1, pitch 1, burn 3 at the end of the attack is fairly strong. So being able to try to push that as often as possible is ideal here. With that in mind, this has been the deck. We're going to have some gameplay for this on Thursday. Next week, we're going to look at Avatar. We're going to have an Avatar deck, and we're going to do 5 cards, 5 minutes for Avatar, in part because I will be away next week. So I'll have the video out ahead of time before I am actually truly fully gone. We'll have 5 cards, 5 minutes for it as well. And then in the following weeks, we'll have another Clock Talk. In that Clock Talk, we'll be kind of wrapping up the spring season, finishing out, hey, this is where things ended up overall, where we'll catch up from the things from these past weekend as well as next weekend, kind of put them all in at once and kind of do a final summary of the spring as we begin to transition to begin to look into the fall. We'll also probably cover any additional news that was covered in the JP stream that's relevant for English. I'm expecting that we'll potentially hear news about a ban list update in JP that may eventually down the road impact the English meta in some way. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you haven't done the like, subscribe thing, please do. But until the next time, have a good one.